Hey guys, welcome back. The movie I'm covering today is Joker 2019, directed by Todd Phillips. The premise of the movie is essentially that after being framed for illegal gun ownership, a professional clown named Arthur Fleck is fired from his job and tries to finally grasp his own happiness. What do I like about this movie? Arthur's character arc is really odd in a fashion. By the Save the Cat screenwriting model, a character arc is revealed by the opening and closing images of a film. Our opening image is Arthur Fleck as a clown trying to force a smile. Our closing image is Arthur forming a real smile with blood smeared on his lips. A really nice expression of how the violence catalyzed by his actions has given him genuine happiness. This aspect of his arc is also revealed really nicely by the lighting. A couple examples being when Arthur kills his mother. He's bathed in heavenly light, even though the world outside of his mother's hospital room is really dark. After killing the man who set him up with the gun, Arthur dances his way down the stairs bathed in golden light and full Joker regalia, the makeup, the suit, everything. We also see dancing after Arthur's first kill. It's really nice in a fashion that Joker makes room for moments that are purely expressionistic, not just present for the plot in a Newtonian sense. And Arthur's arc is really intriguing in a couple of ways. Typically in a movie that takes these kinds of tragic turns, the protagonist would become unhappier and unhappier as their life spiraled out of control. But Arthur ascends to heavenly happiness as he becomes worse and worse. But his arc is also interesting in a metatextual sense. We can definitely think of certain films as being haptic, as extending the body. Exploitation movies, B-movies, horror, erotica, all serve this function to some degree. Joker presents us with an absolutely filthy, violent, vile world that's broken up by the ethereal light of Arthur's presence. To some extent, he's a Christ figure, but the film presents this with ambiguity. That's generally something it's really great at. Arthur himself, ironically, has no delusions that he's some kind of symbol of hope for the movement his actions triggered. He doesn't care. And this movement leads to the death of Bruce Wayne's parents, triggering his eventual turn to Batman one day. Going a bit deeper on that, a lot of Hollywood political abstractions take the route that there is a clear good guy and bad guy. If you look at a property like Thug or The Good Fight, the protesters would unequivocally be the good guys and the rich the bad guys. It's less clear in the case of Joker. A rich character like Thomas Wayne is depicted as having certain redeeming qualities like being a good father, while an impoverished character like Arthur murders people, even stalking and potentially murdering the woman he thought was his girlfriend. And he's the figurehead for the movement. A dangerous, clinically mentally ill stalker/murderer. The movie does have some really interesting things to say about class. Probably my favorite scene in the movie is when Arthur enters the screening of a Chaplin movie. And initially he laughs with Charlie, but then he notices all the rich people around him laughing too, and becomes unhappy. The rich people are laughing at Charlie, not with him. Deepening my point, let me talk about folk culture for a second. The culture of those regarded to be lower class is often abstracted and intellectualized away from the people who created it for the pleasure of those who can financially afford to enjoy it that way. The museum scene of Black Panther could arguably be a good illustration of this pattern. Charlie Chaplin, as a Marxist, was himself a figure of class warfare, yet we're shown scores of rich characters laughing at him, as his impoverished character, the tramp, naturally. This is a great meta-evocation of the way the rich consume films that encourage class warfare without, in real life, going all in. The rich will often allege they're stumping for the poor while maintaining a gap between themselves and the poor, because they view themselves to be the moral and intellectual betters. They essentially shove the good poor into the category of noble savage unless they actually manage to transcend their circumstances and become members of the elite. They measure human value in money, essentially. That the film uses Arthur to launch a direct attack on the talk show host as a symbol also fits this pattern. Most talk show hosts are essentially mouthpieces for corporate interests. They look pretty and showcase the products, actors, movies, TV shows, etc., whoever comes on their show to promote their product. Personality-wise, it could be said they tend to be pretty homogenous. Coming back to the movie, talk show host Murray essentially punches down on Arthur, bringing him onto the show to make a joke out of him. to make a joke out of an impoverished man with mental illness. Murray is yet another rich man trying to intellectually inoculate against what Arthur represents: the body, chaos, the misfortune by chance that is mental illness. He doesn't genuinely expect Arthur to be dangerous. This sentiment is similarly reflected in Nolan's The Dark Knight, wherein rich, hierarchical gangsters turn to a man they don't understand, a force of chaos, as a way of trying to solve their problems. A figure like Murray is able to inoculate against the real chaos and unfairness of the world by bringing it into his world, his show, and defeating it in front of his audience by posturing as a moral and intellectual authority. He doesn't genuinely expect his power dynamic to be undone, let alone to be killed. The part that humor plays in this is also important. Humor is the best way to deal with the tragedies of life. Making fun of tragedy, making fun of our differences and difficult circumstances makes it easier to live. Arthur makes a joke about a child's death to Murray, an offensive subject. Murray attempts to stamp down on Arthur as a moral authority because the joke is offensive. There's a great clip out there of Patrice O'Neill debating a concerned moral guardian on the subject of comedy that gets this across really well. To someone like Murray, comedy that's of high quality should be morally good. It needs to lock out death, chaos, and the body, because those things are offensive. They create death salience, which is depressing. They're anti-intellectual. They're lower class in ideological caliber. They assert truth in a way that isn't necessarily clean and refined. The Murrays of the world want Frasier instead of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. The director, Todd Phillips, has actually come out asserting that this movie is partially addressing cancel culture versus comedians. You know, like Louis C.K., Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart, Aziz Ansari. But he's hitting on a truth much deeper and much longer spanning about the differences between the upper and lower classes. The movie turns Chaplin into something of an archetype unto himself, almost Jungian in nature, though we could generally say he represents the archetype of the fool. But anyway, Arthur actually undergoes an apotheosis into Chaplin as an archetype, if the very ending is anything to go by. Arthur winds up in an asylum running from guards in a comically stylistic fashion while his feet leave bloodied footprints on the floor, very reminiscent of the golden comedies from the likes of Harold Lloyd, Chaplin, Buster Keaton, etc., etc. The film has a unique understanding of comedy in a sense. One of the best moments in the film actually comes when Arthur's friend Gary is trying to leave the apartment after Arthur's latest murder, and Arthur jump scares him as a way of joking around. And then the movie doubles down by having Gary, a dwarf, not be able to reach the door handle, having to ask Arthur to get it. The film understands that comedy and tragedy are two sides of the same coin. These moments are funny because the audience is balanced on a knife's edge of suspense. The comedy that really works comes when you're pushed to the edge a little bit, when it drives you at least a little bit insane. The joke Arthur delivers right before killing Murray also drives this home. Suffering is funny, and that's not to say that goodness doesn't exist in the context of the film. In a sense, maybe the funniest thing about the movie is how simple real goodness actually is. Gary, the dwarf, is good, and all he has to do to be good is to be nice. But the complexity and misery of the world of Joker makes simple kindness extremely elusive to its often bitter, hardened denizens. Which of course is also a comment on how difficult it can be to find simple kindness in the real world in the current political climate. But its presence is important for the contrast it provides. That the rich characters portend to goodness is also important for this reason. Take a film like Requiem for a Dream, where there really is no good on display for contrast. Not even portended good. In a truly vile world without goodness, there's not necessarily a thing that's quote-unquote bad about it, because it takes good to define bad. Without goodness, bad just sort of is. It's the natural state of things. In Joker, there are people who are good and those who portend to be good, even if their true character is more complicated. This is why I ultimately wouldn't call Joker a nihilistic film. In fact, it's a film that desperately wants empathy, even / especially for a victim of the system like Arthur Fleck. Alright guys, thanks for stopping by my channel. Hit like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and have a nice day.